Imagine a Bible that not only conveys spiritual messages, but also presents a calendar entirely different from what we know today. The Bible of 1775 transports us to an era where time followed natural and spiritual cycles, with March as the first month of the year and a total of 13 months. This rare edition challenges our perception of the modern calendar and reveals an intimate connection between humanity, nature, and the cosmos. The Bible of 1775 is a true historical treasure, as it reveals a calendar structure significantly different from the one we know today. By presenting March as the first month of the year and including 13 months in total, this edition places us in front of a system that intrigues with its differences from the widely accepted Gregorian calendar. The weekly division, starting on Sunday and ending on Saturday, also reinforces an organization of time that seems much older and perhaps more connected to natural cycles. The presence of 13 months, in particular, suggests that this calendar could be more closely linked to lunar cycles, in contrast to our modern solar calendar with 12 months. The moon played an important role in ancient cultures, and many lunar-based calendars tended to adjust time with a 13th month. This raises questions about how this 1775 Bible, with its religious roots, could maintain a system so strongly based on astronomical and spiritual observations. This different reckoning of time could also be connected to a more sacred perception of natural cycles. Ancient civilizations often aligned their spiritual and agricultural practices with the rhythms of nature, making the calendar not just a tool for social organization, but also a spiritual connection to the cosmos. What seems today to be merely a curiosity may, in fact, have been a tool for maintaining balance between humans and the universe. What makes this Bible even more intriguing is the fact that the weekly structure begins on Sunday, which contrasts with many modern calendars where Monday is the first day of the week. This difference indicates a historical understanding of the role of days and their spiritual energies, with Sunday being the day dedicated to the sun, considered the most powerful and central celestial body in ancient astrology. Positioning Sunday as the first day reflects a worldview where the week begins with the strength of solar light. Another fascinating aspect is the week ending with Saturday as the seventh day, reserved for rest. In many religious traditions, such as Judaism and Christianity, Saturday is seen as a sacred day, a time for rest and reflection. By placing it as the last day of the week, the 1775 Bible seems to uphold this ancient tradition, even though modern religious practice has shifted worship to Sunday. Ultimately, this calendar structure in the 1775 Bible gives us a window into understanding how ancient societies organized not only their time, but also their spirituality. The changes that have occurred since then, especially with the adoption of the Gregorian calendar, signal a profound transformation not only in religious practices, but in the very way people connected with time and the cosmos. Before the calendar reformed by Julius Caesar in the 1st century BCE, the new year began in March, aligned with the vernal equinox. This choice made sense in natural terms, as it marked the moment when spring brought the rebirth of life after winter. The 1775 calendar that preserves this tradition suggests that the start of the year was deeply rooted in nature's cycles and seasons, giving time a spiritual meaning. March, in Roman mythology, was the month dedicated to Mars, the god of war, symbolizing the beginning of a new cycle of conquest and renewal. From this point, the entire annual cycle unfolded, with each month reflecting an aspect of agricultural, military, or spiritual life. When the calendar was reformed, January and February were added, shifting the start of the year to a time less connected to the natural change of seasons, more focused on civil and political matters. The transition to January as the start of the year was solidified by the Gregorian calendar, introduced in the 16th century by Pope Gregory XIII. This change aimed to correct discrepancies accumulated in the Julian calendar, particularly regarding the observance of Easter. However, by moving the beginning of the year to January, a month associated with winter in the Northern Hemisphere, humanity distanced itself from the practice of starting the year with the rebirth of spring. Beyond the religious and agricultural implications, this change in the calendar also had a psychological impact. Beginning the year in March symbolized a new beginning, the blossoming and renewal of life. When the calendar adjusted to begin in winter, in January, it reflected a society more focused on civil, administrative, and political issues than on the spiritual traditions that linked time to the natural cycle of the earth. The Bible of 1775, by keeping March as the first month, preserves a time structure that dates back to an era more connected with natural rhythms. This detail can be interpreted as an attempt to maintain a more direct relationship between the calendar and the cycle of life, renewal, and growth, something that was largely lost with subsequent calendar reforms. Thus, the transition from March to January as the start of the year may not just be a historical curiosity, but a sign of how societies evolved and disconnected from the natural rhythms that once dominated their lives and spirituality. Perhaps the Bible of 1775 is inviting us to reconsider our relationship with time and nature. In the Bible of 1775, Sunday is presented as the first day of the week, something that may seem unusual to the modern public. However, this organization is deeply rooted in ancient traditions. Sunday, being the day dedicated to the sun, reflects a spiritual understanding that places the light, energy, and power of this celestial body at the center of the week, initiating the weekly cycle with the strength that the sun symbolizes. In ancient Rome, Dies Solis, or Sunday, was an important day dedicated to the worship of this celestial body, which was revered for its influence on life on Earth. When Christianity began to spread within the Roman Empire, many of these solar traditions were absorbed into the new religion. Constantine, the first Christian emperor, officially established Sunday as the day of worship, unifying pagan and Christian practices into a single calendar. This fusion of traditions shows how Sunday gained prominence as the first day of the week, and how it has shaped religious and cultural practices ever since. Sunday not only became the day of rest and worship for many Christians, but also marked the beginning of a weekly cycle that placed solar energy as the driving force of time. This connection between time, solar energy, and spirituality is a recurring theme in many ancient cultures. Furthermore, the Bible of 1775, by preserving this weekly order, may suggest that the original calendar, which organized time according to celestial bodies, maintained its spiritual relevance over the centuries. Sunday, as the sun's day, continues to carry this symbolic energy of rebirth, light, and divine power. For ancient cultures, the sun was seen not only as a source of physical light, but also of spiritual light. This organization of time, with Sunday as the first day, also raises questions about how time was perceived and lived in antiquity. If Sunday was the start of a new cycle, it could indicate that people saw this day as a moment of renewal, energy, and purpose. Today, Sunday is generally considered the end of a week, something that seems to contrast with the ancient perception, where it was the starting point. In the end, this Bible of 1775 not only preserves a historical curiosity about time, but also invites us to reflect on how the organization of time reflects spiritual values. Placing Sunday at the beginning of the week, as the ancients did, might be a way of reminding us that time and spirituality are intimately connected, and that the calendar is a powerful tool for shaping our perception of both. The fact that the Bible of 1775 includes 13 months is perhaps one of the most intriguing aspects of this ancient calendar. The 13 months, instead of the 12 months we have in the modern Gregorian calendar, suggest a time organization more closely aligned with lunar cycles. The lunar cycle lasts about 28 days, resulting in approximately 13 lunar cycles over a solar year, making the 13-month calendar a natural choice for many ancient cultures. Cultures that adopted the lunar calendar, such as the ancient Hebrews, adjusted their calendar with an additional month in certain years to maintain alignment with the solar cycle. This resulted in years with 13 months, a cycle that reflected both the rhythm of the moon and that of the sun. This type of calendar was widely used to determine agricultural seasons and religious festivals, showing the importance of keeping time in sync with nature's rhythms. The introduction of a purely solar calendar, like the one we use today, came with Julius Caesar's reform in the 1st century BCE. The Julian calendar, which served as the basis for the Gregorian calendar, standardized the year into 12 months to create a more stable and predictable structure, particularly useful for the administrative and political needs of the Roman Empire. However, this change had a spiritual impact, distancing society from ancient practices. The 13 months, therefore, represent a time structure more intimate with natural cycles, especially in terms of agriculture and spirituality. The lunar cycle was closely observed by agrarian societies that needed the lunar time to coordinate their harvests and plantings. In many cultures, the lunar cycle was also linked to spiritual rituals and community life. suggesting that the 13-month calendar might be related to a way of life more harmonious with the cosmos. Furthermore, the number 13 has deep symbolism in various ancient traditions. In some cultures, it is seen as a sacred number, linked to transformation and rebirth. However, over time, the number 13 became viewed with superstition in many modern societies, perhaps as a reflection of the shift from the lunar calendar to the solar one. The fear of the number 13 may be a remnant of this cultural and spiritual change. Therefore, the inclusion of 13 months in the 1775 Bible can be seen as an attempt to preserve an older tradition, a reminder that time was not always measured as we do today. The 13-month calendar, more aligned with natural cycles, suggests a society that was more in tune with the cosmos and spirituality, something that seems to have been lost in later calendar reforms. The adoption of the Gregorian calendar, introduced in the 16th century by Pope Gregory III, represented one of the most significant changes in the way time has been counted throughout human history. The calendar was implemented to correct the discrepancies in the Julian calendar, which had become inaccurate over the centuries, causing problems in the observance of Easter and other important religious events. However, the Catholic Church's influence in this process went far beyond the technical correction of dates. One of the Church's main motivations in introducing the Gregorian calendar was to ensure that Christian festivities, such as Easter, remained aligned with the liturgical calendar. Easter, for example, follows the lunar cycle and must occur on the Sunday after the full moon, following the vernal equinox. The introduction of the new calendar ensured that these dates were consistently observed, preserving religious and spiritual order. However, this change also reflected the Church's power to shape society. By adjusting the calendar, the Church was, in fact, consolidating its authority over time, one of the most powerful forces governing human life. Controlling the calendar meant controlling the rhythms of daily life, from holidays to harvests, and the Church seized this opportunity to reinforce its influence in the lives of the faithful. Moreover, by adopting a solar calendar, the Church also distanced itself from the pagan traditions that used lunar calendars. Many ancient cultures, including the Celts and Hebrews, used the lunar cycle to organize their festivals and spiritual practices. By replacing these calendars with a solar system of 12 months, the Church effectively disconnected Christian rituals from the lunar cycles that had been revered for millennia. The Church's influence on the changes to the calendar can be seen as part of a broader effort to Christianize the practices of time. During the Middle Ages, many pagan festivals were adapted or replaced by Christian celebrations, and the calendar was adjusted to reflect these new religious priorities. For example, Christmas, celebrated on December 25th, coincides with pagan festivals such as the Roman Saturnalia and the winter solstice, integrating ancient traditions into a new Christian context. The introduction of the Gregorian calendar was not just a technical correction. It was a profound change in how time was understood and lived. The Bible of 1775, by preserving an older calendar structure, reminds us of a time when time was more intimately linked to spirituality and nature, before the Church and the state began shaping the calendar for their own purposes. Astrology played a crucial role in structuring ancient calendars, and the Bible of 1775 seems to maintain this connection by presenting Sunday as the first day of the week. Since time immemorial, civilizations observed celestial bodies to organize their lives, both spiritually and in everyday matters. The planets, stars, and moon were considered divine influences, and each day of the week was associated with one of these cosmic forces. The 7-day week, for example, is directly linked to the 7 planets known in antiquity: the Sun, Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn. Sunday, as the first day of the week, corresponded to the Sun, symbolizing strength, vitality, and renewal. People believed that the positioning of the planets directly influenced events on Earth, including harvests, human behavior, and even wars. This concept of sacred time, based on planetary influences, deeply structured spiritual and practical life. The 1775 calendar preserves a tradition where celestial alignment plays a determining role in time. The moon, for instance, was a constant reference for organizing time, especially in agricultural societies. Each lunar phase dictated not only the cycle of harvests, but also religious rituals and festivals. It was believed that each lunar phase carried different energies that directly affected humans, their emotions, and behaviors. With the advent of the solar calendar, the importance of lunar phases and planetary influences began to diminish. However, the study of astrology remained a significant practice for many cultures, who still saw the stars and planets as a reflection of divine will. Even today, many religious calendars, such as the Hebrew and Islamic ones, retain the lunar cycle as their foundation, preserving this connection between time and astrology. The 13-month structure observed in the Bible of 1775 can also be interpreted as an attempt to maintain a balance between lunar and solar time, suggesting a society that sought to live in harmony with the cosmos. Each month could have been associated with a particular constellation or astrological cycle, creating a deep spiritual connection between humans and the universe. Therefore, astrology and the organization of time have always been deeply intertwined. The 1775 calendar, by preserving ancient traditions, reminds us of a time when the night sky was not just a curiosity, but a spiritual compass and a source of wisdom. By understanding the role astrology played in the lives of these cultures, we can recover a sense of awe and respect for the cosmic forces that shape our world. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, Saturday is traditionally the day of rest, the Shabbat, when the faithful are called to stop their activities and dedicate themselves to spiritual reflection. The Bible of 1775 preserves Saturday as the seventh day of the week, following the biblical narrative of creation, where God rested on the seventh day. However, the shift to Sunday worship, promoted by Constantine in the 4th century, transformed the religious dynamic of millions of Christians. The transition to Sunday, initially to accommodate both Christians and pagans who already worshipped the sun on that day, was a strategic decision. Emperor Constantine, by unifying these practices, not only solidified Sunday as the day of worship, but also reinforced the Roman Empire's dominion over nascent Christianity. This marked the beginning of a change that continues to define how time and religiosity intertwine in the Western world. This shift from Saturday to Sunday had significant implications. Theologically, Saturday, as the sacred day of rest, is a mark of obedience to God, especially in Jewish traditions. By shifting the focus to Sunday, a new religious narrative was created, where Sunday symbolized the resurrection of Christ. This profoundly altered the liturgy and religious calendar of Christian churches, partially disconnecting from the traditions of the Old Testament. Some Christian denominations, such as Seventh-day Adventists, still observe Saturday as the day of rest, arguing that the change to Sunday was a human, not divine alteration. This divergence raises important questions about scriptural interpretation and how religious practices can evolve over time due to political and cultural influences rather than spiritual directives. The preservation of Saturday as the seventh day in the 1775 Bible is evidence that, for some cultures and traditions, the ancient practice still had relevance. This suggests that while the Christian world generally adopted Sunday as the day of worship, there was still resistance to this change, and the observance of Saturday continued to be a deeply rooted practice in some communities. Reflecting on the religious implications of this shift, we realize that the calendar is more than just a tool for measuring time. It carries values, traditions, and spiritual identities that shape how we live and worship. The Bible of 1775 reminds us of a time when observing the Sabbath was at the center of spiritual life, a tradition that some groups still preserve in the name of faithfulness to the original scriptures. Lunar and solar cycles have always played an essential role in the organization of time and spirituality. The Bible of 1775, by adopting a calendar with 13 months, suggests a direct connection with lunar cycles, which were widely used by ancient civilizations to measure time and mark religious and agricultural events. The moon, with its visible and constant phases, was a natural clock that regulated both the tides and human life rhythms. The phases of the moon, new, waxing, full, and waning, were seen as moments of transformation, growth, and decline, reflecting the cycles of birth, life, death, and rebirth. These lunar cycles were not only observed for practical reasons, such as agriculture, but also carried deep spiritual significance. The full moon, for example, was often associated with rituals of celebration and harvest, while the new moon symbolized new beginnings. The solar cycle, in turn, regulated the seasons and determined the course of the year. The winter solstice, for example, marked the point when the days began to lengthen again, bringing the promise of renewal and a new cycle of life. This change was celebrated in various cultures, including the Yule festival in the pagan traditions of Northern Europe and the Roman Saturnalia. These festivals, centered on the return of solar light, often coincide with Christmas, which was later Christianized. The 1775 calendar, by preserving both solar and lunar elements, may reflect an attempt to maintain balance between these two cosmic rhythms. The connection with the lunar cycle is particularly evident in the inclusion of 13 months, something that directly aligns with the number of lunar cycles in a solar year. This indicates a society that still deeply valued the influence of the moon on its spiritual and daily life. With the advent of the Gregorian solar calendar, this balance was broken. The adoption of a purely solar calendar, although more precise for civil and administrative purposes, disconnected society from many of the natural rhythms that once guided their lives. This disconnection is seen, for example, in how religious festivals were standardized, losing their connection to the lunar cycles that once determined their timing. Thus, studying lunar and solar cycles reminds us of a time when human time was more attuned to the cosmos. The 1775 calendar preserves a structure that reflects this connection and suggests that, in moving away from these natural cycles, we may have lost something fundamental in our spirituality. Restoring this harmony, even symbolically, may help us reconnect with the cosmic rhythms that have long governed our existence. Christmas, celebrated on December 25th, is one of the most important Christian holidays, but its origins are strongly tied to pagan festivals that celebrated the winter solstice. The Bible of 1775, with its peculiar calendar, raises the question of how Christmas would fit into a different time structure. This date, which coincides with the Roman Saturnalia and the Yule festival of the Norse peoples, was strategically chosen by the Church to facilitate the conversion of pagans to Christianity. Saturnalia was a Roman festival dedicated to the god Saturn, which took place at the end of December. During this celebration, there was a festive atmosphere, with gifts exchanged, banquets held, and social rules temporarily suspended. The similarities with Christmas traditions, such as gift-giving and large feasts, are evident, suggesting that Christmas absorbed many of these customs to ease the transition of the Romans to Christianity. Similarly, the Yule festival, celebrated by the Germanic and Norse peoples, marked the return of light after the winter solstice. This festival centered on the idea of rebirth and renewal, with the Yule log being burned in celebration of the sun's return. When Christianity spread through Europe, many of these pagan traditions were incorporated into Christmas celebrations, including the use of decorated trees and lights. The Church's decision to officialize Christmas on December 25th in the 4th century was a strategic choice to align with these already established festivals. This allowed pagan practices to be Christianized, making the acceptance of Christianity easier for pagans. However, the Bible does not mention the exact date of Jesus' birth, and many scholars suggest that he was likely born in the spring, making the choice of December more symbolic than historical. In addition to the symbolism of solar rebirth, Christmas also reflects the idea of Christ as the light of the world, an image that aligns perfectly with the return of the sun at the winter solstice. The incorporation of these pagan traditions into Christianity shows how ancient religions influenced the structure and practice of modern celebrations. This fusion of rituals demonstrates how the calendar was shaped for both spiritual and political reasons. Thus, by studying the 1775 Bible and its calendar, we are invited to reflect on how Christmas, which we now associate with the birth of Christ, actually carries elements of much older and pagan celebrations. The choice of December 25th can be seen as an attempt to synchronize different traditions into a single celebration, but it raises the question: if we were using a different calendar, such as that of 1775, would Christmas have the same significance? The calendar is not just a tool for measuring time, it is an expression of a society's worldview. The Bible of 1775, with its 13 months and weekly structure beginning on Sunday, offers a window into how ancient societies conceived time, in a way that was more connected to the cosmos. For these cultures, time was not something isolated, but part of a natural and spiritual cycle involving the universe. This view is reflected in how the ancients organized their lives around lunar, solar, and stellar cycles. Time was a living force, not only dictating the rhythm of harvests and festivals, but also directly influencing religious and spiritual practices. The alignment of religious celebrations with natural cycles, such as solstices and equinoxes, suggests a conscious attempt to maintain human life in harmony with cosmic forces. The Gregorian calendar, introduced in the 16th century, represented a break from this tradition. Although it was created to solve technical problems in the Julian calendar, It also reflected a shift in how Western society viewed time. By focusing on a solar calendar and fixing dates such as Christmas and Easter on specific periods, the Gregorian calendar distanced itself from the natural rhythms that had guided civilizations for millennia. The preservation of a different calendar in the Bible of 1775, with its 13 months and weeks starting on Sunday, may suggest resistance to this change. Perhaps there was a desire to maintain a closer connection with natural cycles, rather than fully submitting to the new calendar adopted by the Church and the state. This Bible thus becomes a time capsule, preserving an ancient worldview that still valued alignment with the cosmos. Reflecting on this worldview, we are led to question how our relationship with time has changed. The modern calendar, with its rigidity and detachment from natural cycles, may have disconnected us from a deeper understanding of life and the universe. Time, once seen as cyclical and interconnected with nature, is now perceived as linear and artificial, which may have spiritual and psychological implications. The Bible of 1775, with its alternative calendar, reminds us that time is more than just a sequence of days and months. It is a cultural and spiritual construction that shapes our worldview. By studying these ancient traditions, we can recover a deeper understanding of time, one that reconnects us with the cosmos and the natural cycles that govern our lives. The Bible of 1775 invites us to reflect on how time and spirituality were deeply intertwined in ancient societies. With its 13 months and a weekly structure that honors millennia-old traditions, it is more than just a historical curiosity. It is a reminder that time can be measured not only by human conventions, but also by the cycles of the cosmos. The question remains, are we disconnected from these spiritual roots by following the modern calendar?